All right, guys. Well, I just want to kick this episode off. We're going to let Evan take over here in a minute, but I'm just going to kind of run through. We have an amazing panel here on marketing, branding, and the future of cannabis. And I'm just going to kind of go from left to right, starting with Mirsky, who's the founder and CEO of Wick and Mortar, a cannabis-focused branding agency based in Seattle, Washington. He's been featured in over 15 magazines, including Entrepreneur Media and Forbes. He was named to the top 40 under 40 in Marijuana Venture magazine, and most recently the Dope Magazine Industry Award winners for the best cannabis design firm 2 years in a row. We also have Rosie Mattio. Rosie is the founder of Mattio Communications, the preeminent cannabis marketing agency in the U.S. Rosie is considered a market maker in the world of cannabis. She has been named to the High Times Female 50, the Forbes 15 Powerful and Innovative Women in Cannabis, and Mattio Communications was recently ranked #1 cannabis PR firm.
My video is not on your phone.
Everyone.
And we also have Valda Coryat with Trulieve. She's has extensive past building brands from Fortune 500 consumer packaging good company, private equity.
Would you do New York grilled cheese?
Before joining Trulieve as the chief marketing officer, she was the director of marketing at the National Mango Board. What's up? You may have heard her Elevate Your Grind podcast a few weeks ago. We're very excited to have her back. We also have Yesenia Garcia with Curaleaf. Yesenia is a longtime resident of South Florida. She graduated from FIU and went on to lead an in-house creative marketing agency of one of South Florida's leading gaming and entertainment establishments. She earned a reputation for negotiating seven-figure agreements with the media and sports markets and has hosted events ranging from annual music festivals to the PGA nationwide tour. Yesenia joined Curaleaf last year in May as the director of marketing, and we're excited to hear about their efforts throughout Florida. And then our great host for tonight is Evan Bopp, a student at the University of Miami, my alma mater, and the marketing chair of Cannabis Lab's Miami-Dade chapter. He started a freelance digital agency in his hometown of upstate New York before launching Potent Brands, a cannabis-specific advertising agency here in Miami, Florida. He's the producer of Elevate Your Grind podcast and will be our moderator for today's discussion. And I'm your Miami president, Eric Stevens with Florida for Care. So without further ado, Evan, you want to take it over from here?
Sure. Thank you for the introduction, Eric. And thank you everyone joining us tonight. Again, my name's Evan. I'm the marketing chair for the Miami-Dade chapter of Cannabis Lab. Tonight, we're going to be talking about marketing, branding, events, how that has all been impacted by the past few months. And we have some of the best industry experts to chime in on that. We know cannabis and its regulations are ever changing and have been. These folks have been on the forefront of that for the past decade and then some. I want to give everyone a chance to further introduce themselves and their companies. So Rosie, would you like to kick it off for everyone?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here tonight. I'm Rosie Mattio. I'm founder and CEO of Mattio Communications. We're a strategic communications agency focused on the cannabis space. We represent almost over 38 cannabis clients as of today, 39, including Curaleaf. So it's great to see you, Yesenia. We get to chat on the phone very often, and I'm so happy to be here.
Valda, would you like to go?
Sure. I'm very happy to be here. Good to meet everyone. I'm probably the newbie to cannabis, having joined Trulieve at the beginning of December in 2019. You heard a little bit about my background, and I'm just really excited to bring all of that very diverse experience to cannabis. I do think that this is more than a job. It's a bit of a mission. I'm on a mission for sure on behalf of Trulieve. But there's a lot beyond just selling product. And, we can get into that a little bit later.
So, Yesenia, would you like to go?
Yep. So I'm the director of marketing for Curaleaf, Florida. Obviously, we are nationwide, but I'm going to be speaking more on the Florida market specifically. I'm excited to be part of the panel and hear what everybody's got to say.
And Jared, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, Mirsky, CEO and founder of Wick and Mortar. We were the very first cannabis-focused branding and marketing agency in the world. Started 11 years ago. And we've worked with clients in pretty much every medical and recreational state as well as country, ranging from Candescents to Auroras. So I hope I can, bring my 11 years of knowledge and experience to this amazing panel of panelists. And I look forward to sharing as much as I can with all of you. Thank you.
Awesome. So Jared, I'm actually going to come right back to you. Would you just be able to give a brief explanation and background as to why cannabis in the industry in terms of marketing and branding is different from other industries, especially when it comes towards paid advertising and the limitations that you have to face as an agency?
That's like 4 things in one.
Yeah. The clip notes.
Well, let me first preface by starting with the fact that the cannabis industry is made up of really like 3 other macro industries. And that's what makes the cannabis industry so much fun and unique. Unlike any other industry, cannabis fits into 3 sectors, and that's, medical, recreational, and wellness. And so when you look at, and I know this is kind of going out of digital marketing, but it's really into communication, but you look at packaging in the traditional world with respect to coffee, wine, beer, milk, they all have what's called a universal, or rather a global packaging language. And this is a language that's communicated to consumers throughout each brand. No matter what name their coffee company is, they share this same vernacular that communicates what the intended experience is. Now, cannabis had that, and that was indica, sativa, and hybrid, but that was deemed null and void to a degree because everything's a hybrid. One's just more indica dominant or sativa dominant. So when you look at, how you bring a brand to market, it's important to identify how the packaging or the experience in relation to the strains you've chosen or the CBD, formulation you've developed is, what is that intended experience and how do you communicate that through packaging? So, let's look at Candescent as an example. When we worked with them, during the early stages of their build out, we were examining things like, their packaging language, calm, create, connect, charge, and so forth. And when looking at that packaging language, it was important to ensure that what we were communicating to a consumer didn't necessarily make claims, but also gave them the ability to communicate to a bud tender as to what they wanted, making their purchase and transaction much easier. Most consumers that enter into the market, they really don't know what strains mean what. They just hear something from a friend and, I can tell you Blue Dream without a doubt is my favorite strain because that is like the only thing that I can consciously remember making me feel just right. But most consumers, as you know, they bounce from brand to brand. The loyalty they have for a brand is very, very small. But if you can find a way to truly differentiate yourself with respect to the tone of voice and, again, the packaging language that you create, you can develop and strengthen that brand loyalty. Just before I go too off topic, a good example, we're building a brand right now for ourselves, and it's based on creatives. It's strains, just like every other brand has, but we have chosen strains that are good for coders who maybe want a green crack, right? And they want to stay up late and code, or, you've got a videographer, a photographer who needs still calm hands. So what strains can we create from that? Or you've got, designers, right? Well, what's a good way for someone like a designer to get into a good headspace? So when you can figure out how to take what everyone's doing, but rather focus that same product on a category of, or rather on a niche, but with packaging categories, right? It makes it easier to sell and communicate the product, thus creating and establishing more loyalty. And to me, that's the smartest form of marketing, because you can polish a turd all you want and it's still a turd, right? You can put lipstick on a pig and it's still a pig. So no matter how much marketing dollars you spend, it needs to convert well by way of developing a brand that actually meets the needs of the consumers in the first place. So don't be everything to everyone. Really build a niche. It's not difficult, but rather more fun.
Sure. So Valda, how do you, working as a multi-state operator, incorporate those messagings into your social media, your everyday messaging, your packaging, as Jared said, at such a large scale?
Yeah, it's interesting. And Jared made some really great points. I really love actually the way you're thinking about it. And all of us will probably have, I have to say this before other people speak as well, but we're all going to have maybe a little bit different approach, right? And that actually boils down to your strategy as a company and as a brand. And when you develop a brand, it's a promise, right, to those people that are purchasing it. From a national perspective, I would say, and we're not in as many states as some other MSOs, but we really do figure out how to win in the markets that we choose to operate. So how do we do that? We do that by starting local. You've heard people of, being global, but think local. I think that could also apply from a state perspective, because Florida is incredibly different than, say, Massachusetts or California. It all starts with understanding and knowing who that consumer, or in our case, patient is, and what are those motivators for them? Why did they come into this space? Why did they, in some cases, go against the history, right? And as I said, what I bring to this is beyond just profitability. Yes, Trulieve is one of the top 3 most profitable companies in this space. But the reason why is because we really have been committed to the accessibility of the product. And the accessibility means that we have to know all of the patients as best as we can, and to identify of those patients what that need is, and deliver it, what they're looking for consistently with quality and so forth. So we do that by learning Florida, by understanding the patients here. We've done our own proprietary research that nobody else has access to, right? We take that, we interpret it in terms of insights, and you haven't even seen a lot of that come to bear yet, right? So I've been here 7 months. We're really just starting on that journey. But when you know your consumer base and you know their motivators, then you can get to understanding, to your point, Jared, for the person who's an artist, or the person who, needs steady hands versus someone else who needs to be up late at night. If it's somebody that's actually dealing with some very serious medical conditions, and again, in the case of Florida, right? Mm-hmm. How are you designing that product? Not only in terms of what it delivers, from a medication standpoint, but is the packaging and the device that you've created actually something that they can handle, right? Somebody with arthritis, or who's, visually impaired, what are the things that we're doing to ensure that they're able to get that medicine, and that it's as pleasant an experience as possible. And I was joking with someone on another call yesterday, actually, that, cannabis is medicine. I believe in the power of the plant. We don't know, we have yet to uncover the true power of the plant. Israel is far ahead of us. I'm happy to have somebody on my team now who actually spent time in the cannabis space, living in Israel as well. And so there'll be a lot coming out of that. But at the end of the day, it is about focus, but it's also about making sure that you're coming at it from the right place, and that it's absolutely more than just about profits.
Sure. So looking more into Florida specifically, Yesenia, would you be able to talk about how the medical market in the state has expanded over the past few months? It's definitely been increasing in size and in the sales numbers on the OMMU reports. So what have you guys been doing to amplify your messaging, especially during these past few months for Curaleaf?
So we've definitely seen growth, and the market in Florida is very unique, and even from city to city it changes. So you can't look at Florida as a whole. You really have to look at Florida and then the sub-markets in between. So I think that's really important. Some people just think Florida, okay, I have to target Hispanics, or I have to target this demographic, and that's not really the case. So that's one part of it. And through everything we've gone through as a community, really, we tried to stay focused on making the medicine accessible with social distancing restrictions and how we could do. So we immediately switched to completely free delivery, regardless of, purchase levels. We were the first ones to go on 100% on board with curbside delivery. We still offer it, although we've opened our dispensary doors, we still offer the curbside. So if a patient does not feel comfortable coming into the dispensary, we will definitely accommodate. And I think that's part of who we are as a company. So we definitely believe in providing service to our patients and making them feel welcome, and that this cannabis journey that they're on is something that we want to be a part of. And it's kind of going back to what was stated a little earlier by Valda. It is more than the profits, right? So we try to cultivate these relationships, and in times like this, it's key, right? So yes, we opened our doors, but we're definitely still continuing with our free delivery statewide. Our outreach team has definitely been very, very active with the physicians that did stay open. With the ones that are only doing telemedicine, we've supported them by offering the team to speak. So if they had any questions on their products, they could come back to our team and ask us any questions at any time. So just keeping those relationships open so that patients out in the community, even if they weren't in our dispensaries, felt like they had a place to go and ask questions on the products. So
awesome. So Rosie, I want to look at it messaging more from the PR perspective. How has your company and your clients been adjusting to everything that's been happening, like we mentioned, and making sure that those brands stay intact?
See how many people are actually in this room? Gallery view.
So I would say, along the lines of Cindy was saying, like a lot of changes had to be made right away, when COVID hit. And our clients, as the buzzword is, they had to pivot, right? Some stores that had never were not allowed to actually have curbside pickering, or didn't do delivery, didn't have order ahead, and who are used to seeing patients. Like, how do we help them message that, and how do we let the public know that they can get their medicine, they can get their products? So we really worked, within the marketing organizations of the companies we work with to make sure that we were letting the clients, letting their patients know, or their customers know, what was available to them, how they can get it, what safety measures they were taking. So that was on the outward facing side. But a lot of times, these companies really had to rejigger. So we were helping them internally too. Like, how do you communicate state, employee-wide, all the implementations that are happening. So we did a lot of work around that. And it was really important that, what was happening internally, was being communicated externally as well. So everyone knew what was happening, because it was such an uncertain time. So that was a lot of it. And also, because cannabis was deemed essential, right? It was a really big moment for a lot of our clients, because for the first time ever, this is staying open, like, a doctor's office or like a grocery store or any of these other, entities are allowed to stay open. So how do we take advantage of that moment to make sure that we are using whatever messaging we've been working on, months, years past, to show like what our value proposition was in this moment in time where cannabis was deemed essential. And also, because we were able to stay open, and a lot of, cannabis cultivation facilities, manufacturing facilities, they are, medical grade, and they were able to pivot themselves and provide real value to people who maybe don't consume cannabis by doing things like creating hand sanitizers, right? Because we had a lot of those properties within the cultivation facilities, or they had PPE materials. Could they donate those to hospitals? So really working with our clients to, make sure that their customers knew what was happening. They were able to support the community where they could, and make sure that internal comms were really on point.
Awesome, thank you. So looking more into the regulations around marketing and where that has limited your companies to grow, to reach more people. Valda, would you like to touch on what Trulieve has seen as issues, or if you run into any issues trying to put out marketing that just isn't compliant, or how you fix that?
Yeah, so we fortunately have not run into any issues. There's a lot of people that were here before me, have been in the industry and in the company long enough that they know the rules and the guardrails. So they've kind of, educated me on that. But I have to say, I'm like, this is the first category that I've been in that I don't do paid social media, right, on Facebook. Facebook is a pay-to-play platform. The fact that we've grown our base organically is amazing, and it does speak to, I think, the connection that we have with patients right here in Florida. And so, you know, for me, I think it is almost like navigating, you know, a minefield, right, during war or something. When you're working in cannabis, it's you know, you have to find ways around, or you know, to stay within the regulations, but not get your page taken down and all that kind of stuff. So for me, the more difficult part about that is we can't go directly and specifically with the benefits of the products as openly, and that's challenging, right? Especially in an environment like COVID, as others mentioned, you know, we definitely saw delivery, you know, and curbside pickup increase during that time. And so you're really relying on the materials, let's say, that you've printed that they take away with them when they purchase their product to educate. But people really want information beforehand. So that's why we're trying to leverage as much as possible our website, and other digital tools to get that specific information to them, not only to inform their purchase, but also to help them once they've brought the product home. And you know, we're leveraging now as well our network of experts, whether they be doctors or you know, veterans or moms, you know, who Canna Moms. We had a partnership with them on our True Talks, and we've really, I think, stumbled into something pretty great that's digital, but is able to provide information. So as long as you're providing information and you're not putting pricing and the specific THC and all of that on there, you're still able to develop relationships with your audience. And we've seen a lot of growth coming from that.
Awesome. So Jared, looking at organic content, what characteristics of brands are you looking to highlight and emphasize through social media, videos, photography, whatever it may be, packaging, as you said, and how do you incorporate that on a case-by-case basis? We have Jared.
Did we lose him?
I think he's muted.
Jared, you're muted.
There we go. Sorry about that. So if I'm hearing you correctly, your question is, you know, what can brands do to differentiate themselves on social to create more engagement for themselves, more brand awareness, and perhaps more conversion?
Exactly, because if you're looking at cannabis as somewhat of a gray area to talk about and relatively common throughout the brands, how do you?
Yeah. So, you know, I'm a huge fan of testing different things myself. You know, I'm very much engaged in social platforms myself. And, you know, some of the things that we've done in an effort to help raise awareness for, you know, let's say, you know, creating a larger value on Humboldt grown cannabis, right? We filmed a documentary for Pacific Expeditors. We did that as a collaboration in an effort to show, you know, what these growers have went through in an effort to become growers as well as they've grown. And more importantly, command a price point that, well, they deserve to command because of the quality of their product. And so potency, as you know, has been deemed like the most relevant thing when it comes to the price point of cannabis. But when you look at Everclear, that's 100 proof, you know, it tastes like shit and it'll give you a hangover for days, but Belvedere's less potent and more expensive. Well, why? Because it's better. Potency isn't everything. And I know I'm kind of getting off subject, but that was just an example of a piece of content. So if you go to, you know, ahumboldtstory.com, you can check out our 20-minute documentary. We're actually working on another one with Ricky Williams. But looking at social media, you know, creating series, right? Like little micro series. You saw a lot of these influencers doing it. I just recently launched a series called Pot Peeves, and it's just taking off because there's so many things that people get annoyed with when smoking weed: the bad joint roller, the Bogart, the lighter thief, you know? So you can get really creative with respect to how you develop content around your product rather than just relying on what most brands do, and that's product photography and, you know, some little stop motion. Like, that's cool, and that's nice and it's pretty, but you can go further. You can get more creative. Another aspect and thing to consider is how are you repurposing content? And Rosie will love this because she's an amazing writer. And when you look at an article that is written, like let's say you're writing blog posts, and blog posts to most are just a blog post, but if you thought about it, you could actually read that blog post in front of your camera, right? Record that. That's now a vlog. Then you extract the audio. That's now a podcast. And now you chop that vlog that you've put it on YouTube into maybe 3 or 4 different sound bites. And now you've got 10 to 15 different pieces of content that you just repurposed from one single article.
Mm-hmm.
So when you ask, what are brands doing and what are brands not doing, and what are brands that we're working with doing that can and have been able to do to differentiate themselves online, those are just some of the things that we instill in the SOPs of the projects that we're engaging in. But going a little bit further, it also stems, and Valda will, she was spot on, it really starts with the core of who you are as a brand. Your logo and your name is not your brand. That is part of your identity. Your brand is the promise that you make to your customer. So how can you constantly communicate that and translate that through the content that you create while still remaining authentic and, true to your word? But more importantly, finding ways to have a genuine connection and relationship with your customers. Again, product photography doesn't instill a relationship, but if you're doing something that they can relate to, it makes them never forget you, right? And so that's why we try to instill, that's why they say, laughter and fear are the 2 biggest drivers, right? I'm not a huge fan of fear. There's enough fear happening right now. I would rather just make people laugh and smile. But there's also an opportunity to use fear in an effort to help create more opportunities for some of these social responsibility pieces, right? You've got the Last Prisoner Project. That scares the crap out of me. So I'm so happy to help Last Prisoner Project. Ocean plastics, hemp plastics, all of these things that you can do to communicate the values of your brand through your marketing are going to make you a stronger company. Now, one thing that we do a lot with cultivators this is a gem, a little secret I'm giving you guys. But one of the things that we do with some of our clients is we help them grow their social media accounts through a number of different methods, and all organic, of course, but it's done through our little secret formula, we'll just say. That said, once, let's say you've got 250,000 followers or 500,000 followers, right? You can actually start using that growth and that engagement to go direct into these retail stores. So if you're doing a product drop off at a retail store, and part of your ritual is to interview all of the bud tenders on your story, they're going to get really excited to sell your product because they know that they're going to get featured in your story every time you show up. But if you create, some sort of program that says to the bud tender, hey, the bud tender that sells the most of my product is going to get a full 30-second feature or a full 2-minute feature. We're going to interview you and we're going to talk. Well, now you're turning these bud tenders into raving fans. And before you know it, no matter where a bud tender goes, based on the fact that the, what do you call it? Based on the fact that they bounce from one dispensary to another, right? They're going to be telling all of the other dispensaries as to why they should be buying this brand. So it almost kind of works in your favor. So this is a really unique, and Evan, this kind of goes back in your question that you asked me the first time. And this was like, well, what can, with all of the challenges that we have, what are some unique tactics that we can deploy that are specific to the cannabis industry that other industries aren't necessarily used to facing, right? And this is one of them. So, use your social media, get more engaged with the people you're actually meeting in real life when you're going to these dispensaries. And they're going to feel really happy about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just as Valda mentioned, paid media is kind of off the table on socials and in pretty much every platform. So Rosie, I was wondering if you could touch on the importance of earned media in the space and how you go about building that reputation for brands through that medium.
Yeah, and that actually ties into what everybody else is talking about some of our limitations with social media. You know, while we can't, boost the post about, buying a new vape pen, if we get a story about a vape pen in like a Vogue magazine, we can definitely post that media. So we think that the intersection of PR and social are really, really strong in the cannabis space, since we, can't do, what's it called, paid media like on social. So it's become a big tool in the toolbox. And also the way that we're able to place for every type of client. We work with technology companies, we work with brands, we work with retailers, we work with investment funds. It's really being able to work with the client to tell what their story is and how that story plays into the overall narrative, what's happening in the space. I'll just use a vape pen, for example, going to like a media outlet saying, hey, we've got a new vape pen, like they don't care. That's like not a story. That's not what's happening. But if we know that through our data, through what's happening in retailer, what type of person is coming into a store, we can say, this vape pen has, these cannabinoids in it, and it helps like mothers who have anxiety and be able to really use that data to tell a story based on like the brand architecture too. We're really able to, tell meaningful stories to media. So that's one thing we do. It's also about the relationships. Like I always say, this is like a hack. Don't only pitch media when you have something to say. Really become an advocate for them. Find out what they need. And if you build relationships with members of the media, they will come to you and let you know what they're working on, and then you'll be able to, find a source for them. And I always say, like, some of the best relationships I made in the media is not because of placements that have been for my clients. It's because I'm helping them out. So we become a trusted resource. So we come to them with the story, with the brand, they speak to us and we get those stories played. So it's a mixture of really seeing what's happening, on a macro level on the trend side and building relationships. That's what I tell most people.
Rosie, give yourself more credit, because one of the things that you also do that's pretty amazing, just to say it, is
Jared, this is great. I love this.
Well, the thing that most brands don't have that we have to often do is rebrand them, because they don't have a story in the first place. So, Rosie and I are very accustomed to asking very specific in-depth questions in an effort to extrapolate information that typically they don't realize exists, that helps us actually develop this story that has all these micro stories attached to it, because so many people just come into it. They're a chiropractor and they have no story that's really unique that they want to tell with the brand. They just want to make some money and they want to build a business and they like the industry and they're a smoker. So like, how do you build a story out of that? And Rosie's very good at helping create that. So I just wanted to give you some credit there.
that. And to your point, Jared, when you're talking about, telling that story and going into like, the cultivation facilities and how you tell that story in social and breaking those up into little pieces. It's really the same thing as relates to PR. And it is, and that when you're trying to instill trust with the consumer, they want to know like where your product come from. So, if we're pitching a new product, a new flower, maybe it's not about the actual strain. Maybe it's the story of how the grower came into the space. And people want to connect with the story behind a product. So sometimes it's not about the product, it's about who created the product. Or maybe there's an incredible CEO, came from another industry, and because of his or her experience, they're able to change the way that they market cannabis, or that they think about or maybe they've had a parent who was ill, and that's how they got into cannabis. So, they left their job on Wall Street to care for her mother, and she found that this strain was the best, antidote for her mother's back pain. And telling those stories is sometimes the way to get a product story placed, is really getting inside the company. And sometimes it will be on a call and someone will be like, oh, it was like so interesting. 3 people came to the store and they all came in for a certain product and they left with something else. Like, well, that's a story, right? That's about what you're doing in terms of brand education in your retailer. Maybe you didn't think that was a story. That's way more exciting than what we got on the call to talk about. So it's really digging in and finding out what those palatable stories are.
That's right.
Sure. So I'll go to Valda and Yesenia about how you are using earned media and implementing that on a local level as your brands are expanding. So as you're opening new dispensaries, as you're looking to get in with local people in a word of mouth part of the conversation, what strategies are you employing to go about that?
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, from the start of Trulieve, right? We had very strong had and still do have very strong community-based relationships. So we actually have a community engagement team that is very local. We also have some folks on the line now who work in that group, who are part of C-Lab. They not only connect with our physician community and patient advocates, let's say, but also every interest group that you can think of, whether you're talking about LGBTQ or you're talking about veterans. We have a very strong veterans program as well. So there are, I'll say, groups of people who share stories. In fact, we talked about stories a little while ago. And what we've done is on a very local level, make sure that we tap into that. One of our brand partners noticed that when he visited a number of different dispensaries throughout Florida, that the folks who work at Trulieve actually represent the communities in which we serve. So there's no one cookie cutter kind of look to a Trulieve employee. You know, if you're in Miami, you're going to get a Miami vibe, you know, from our employees. If you are in the Panhandle or if you're in Jacksonville, for example, then you're going to see people from that community who themselves, what I also love, I think a lot of our employees, before they even joined Trulieve, were already very active and very much a part of their communities at a very grassroots level. And so we tap into that because we allow, I would say, our employees to bring their whole selves to the office. And then that by default benefits Trulieve. I do want to touch a little bit on the comment about stories. One of the things that I've really enjoyed as well is learning and meeting some of the people behind some of the innovative products that we've brought to the market. So our brand partners, I'll mention Tony from Blue River. Shout out there. I mean, I don't have to say much, right? I just get him on a True Talk. He starts to talk about the origins of the company, what motivated him to be a part of cannabis, who he's worked with, the care that's taken in developing those products, and actually giving the patient base or the social media audience the tips and tricks in terms of devices and temperature and so forth, so that you can get the best experience out of those products. So for us, it is as much local and community and grassroots based in how we build that word of mouth, or actually, we don't even have to build it. I think it actually takes on an energy all its own. And we do that from, you know, the Keys all the way up to the Panhandle and everything in between. So I hope that answered your question. And I'm sure Yesenia probably has more to add. I don't like monopolizing the time. I very much like for it to be a conversation. But I think with cannabis still, there is still a big stigma. And, you know, I'm actually pretty encouraged to see some of the multi-generational conversations that are happening. One of the best stories that I've talked about is I met the mom right behind Charlotte's Web. And so when she spoke in California at a High Times event, I said, there's not a single person in that room, if you're human, that could walk out of there. Obviously, it was a captive audience. Everybody in the room already was committed to cannabis. But if you weren't and you were just there, right, because your company said you had to sit at the table, you should have walked out of there a whole lot more committed, because when you see this mother who was so passionate, who went through all of these hurdles to, you know, allow for her daughter to live as many years as she did, you know, as healthy as she could, and to enjoy the most out of it. Again, that's the type of stuff that is, I think it will melt away all of that nonsense around cannabis that we see throughout the country still. And aside from the profits and the essential business and all of that, that it's helping the economy in a lot of states, that's real, right? That's real talk. We know some of what's keeping cannabis afloat is because states need money and the tax revenues and so forth are there. But aside from that, the human element is very much coming through. And I hope more of us continue to tell those stories.
So picking up where you left off, really. So we kind of divide our approach in three main groups: general community outreach, and that's really just, it doesn't mean that we're going to go to every single cannabis event in the market, right? So we're trying to reach out to the general community, people who may not even know that it's legal in the state. There's still a lot of people, believe it or not, that when we're out, at a yoga festival or a vegan festival or whatever it is, obviously everything for us, we try to maintain that wellness brand. They don't know that cannabis is legal in the state of Florida, and there's a lot of education behind what we do, and for us that's a priority. And when we're entering any new market, we definitely put our feet on the ground, reach out to the local businesses, all of our neighbors, community, whether it's nonprofit organizations or the clinic next door, or the whatever the business is, just to kind of introduce ourselves, let them know that we're here to be a part of the community. If there's any questions they may have, we welcome them to a tour of the dispensary before we open, just kind of laying out the ground so that there's some comfort there. Obviously there is stigma still, unfortunately, in our industry, and it's really our job to try to help people get over that, right? So that's the general community outreach. Obviously we definitely focus on physicians a lot, and it's with the physicians, but really for the patients. So anything in that area, and then our nonprofit work. So whether we're doing fundraisers or we've committed as a team to participate in a beach cleanup, whatever it is to really be a part of the community, we definitely engage in those three areas the most.
Awesome, thank you. And just to the audience, we're going to open it up to Q&A in a little bit. If anyone does have questions that they'd like to ask, you can go ahead and start throwing those in the chat if you're on the Zoom call. And then we'll circle back and read those off in just a little bit. I'd like to hear everyone's thoughts, though, on the forward-looking perspective on cannabis and where you see trends both on a state level or on a macro nationwide level, both for your brands and just from consumers. If you'd like to start, Yesenia, if you'd like to go again, just on what you're seeing, especially here in Florida.
So I think Jared mentioned this at the beginning with the THC levels, and I think as people are becoming more educated, they're realizing that that is not the one driver, right? So we're definitely, again, back to the education component, trying to focus more on terpene profiles and what that looks like. And I think there is some general interest within the community to learn more and be a little more open and not just look at, okay, what's the highest THC level, and realizing that they can benefit from cannabis without focusing on that component alone. We definitely, quality is number one. That's what they want. Variety. So, the quality, the variety, and being able to come into a space where they feel comfortable. And I think that that's key. Coming in, asking whatever questions you may have, and not feeling like you kind of have to hold back or you're unsure, so I think those are the main drivers. I mean, at the end,
you were also going to say consistency.
and at the end of the day, it's really, we all are around the same flower, right? One way or the other. So it's about making a comfortable space for consumption.
Sure. And Valda, as another plant touching company, would you like to give your thoughts?
Thoughts on kind of
where things are going as an industry and what you're looking towards, especially throughout the next, for the end of 2020, what's on your hot list?
It's funny because would you say 2020 end of 2020 feels like tomorrow for me. So it's a little difficult for me to say what I see on the horizon there, but I do think that you'll start to see more innovation. One of the things that surprised me of coming into this space is, pre-Trulieve, of course, I knew about, joints and flower and all of that. But when I see, concentrates and, all of these different forms, I'm like, whoa, I wasn't aware of that before joining. And so I think what's interesting is it's not just the hardcore kind of more rec-leaning type person that's going to that. I do believe that, I hope where the industry is going, that we're taking more of the goodness out of that natural plant and be able to deliver it in forms that are easier for people to use, and also offer them different modes of being discreet, right? So to the point of, I think there is still some stigma. Hopefully people do feel more open about it, but that they also will have different forms, because not everyone is a smoker, right? And so we've got to think about, or not everyone can smoke, even for health reasons or doctor's orders and what have you. So whether it's our true powder or the wax that we launch, et cetera, I think that there's different ways that you can deliver the terpenes, the cannabinoids, and all of the, really full spectrum of benefits to patients, for sure. And then on a policy level, that's actually where my head is more for a marketer. I'm actually thinking about those things because there are a lot of barriers for us. We know that the Safe Banking Act passed through the House, but we're watching a lot of those things very closely, because we didn't talk about how difficult it is to operate as a cannabis company, but absolutely the regulations are their own challenge. We talked about the social media challenges, can't do paid social, really. But I hope the regulations open up so that they treat us like they do the pharmaceutical companies and allow us to operate and bring that relief to more people nationwide.
I would love to add on to that. Just
Yeah, absolutely.
So a lot of people know, and Rosie probably knows, but many don't. Wick and Mortar is, yes, a service-based business, but we're also a brand house. We actually have 10 of our own brands.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't touch the plant, but because we have clients in every single medical and recreational state and have had them at one point or another, we have now the ability to take these brands we've built and essentially license them in each respective state, because we've worked within the laws, rules, and regulations in all of these states, because that's been the nature of our business. So when you look at the traditional market, let's use RX Bar as an example. They were sold to Kellogg for $600 million. They didn't own a facility they didn't own the facility, or manufacturing facilities rather, where their products were developed. They just owned the formulations, the IP, right? And the brand equity. And then the relationships for their distribution. So they had national distribution. They had a great brand. They had clear, true transparency with respect to their tone of voice. And they sold to Kellogg for $600 million. Now, imagine being a cannabis brand and being in every medical and recreational state. Mind you, there isn't one company yet in every medical and recreational state, not one. So if you are, or even in 5, despite the fact you have whether or not you have this grow facility, which I would recommend you don't, I would recommend you license. You are positioning yourself much better, especially because companies like P&G or L'Oreal or Unilever or Johnson & Johnson or Pfizer, who I do consulting for, they don't want to buy the manufacturing facility. They just want the brand, the IP, and then they'll figure the rest out. Because if you think about it, when cannabis goes federally legal, people be able to take cannabis and go from one state to another. So there won't be a need for all of these farms. So what's going to happen? That asset that you've been spending all of this money dumping into lighting and that's going to be gone, because licensing deals are going to take over. No different than what's happening in the traditional industry, which brings me to my final point. And that's, you need to be very, very niche focused. Diapers sell really well because they're made for 2 people, babies and seniors. And it's a very niche product. But you look at sleep aids, and you look at different types of nutraceuticals, and you look at female focused products. You look at dual products, chapstick that's also good for, acne, right? You start to look at all of these really unique categories, because when you're talking about selling a product to a category buyer at a big box retail store, they're not interested in a brand that has every product under the sun, unless you're opening up a Costco and you want to create your own Kirkland signature. But you need to be category focused, because those are the people that you need to win. If you have to win every category just to get that one brand into a store, you're going to create a whole hell of a lot of trouble for yourself. The other part is to make sure that you have the ability to communicate these unique formulations. Because when you look at companies like Hershey's, right? They had Hershey's as the parent company, and then they had Hershey's chocolate, which they turned into an ingredient and then use that ingredient brand name in recipes and other things online that I'm sure you guys have all seen. But more importantly, it's in every single one of their subsidiaries. Reese's Pieces, peanut butter cups, Kit Kat, Almond Joy. It's all made with what? Hershey's chocolate. So they're increasing the brand equity of Hershey's and ensuring that all of their subsidiaries are also married to the parent company because of that formulation. So these are just things to think about when building a brand for the global or national market, because if you have any inclination of getting acquired much easier, you've got to be category and niche focused, plain and simple.
Sure. And Rosie, how do you communicate, niche focuses with your client? Sure, go ahead.
Hold on, I'm just gonna quiet my children.
Absolutely.
It's 6:54 and I've got 4 kids at home, so it's touch and go. So yeah, and I missed the second half of the question, but I'm just gonna dovetail off what everyone was talking about, and about being niche. And I'm seeing a question that popped up from Angela, who I love. And so I think as it relates to niche and reaching your consumer, where cannabis, we haven't spoken about this yet, it's born in an age where like digital advertising or like programmatic or e-commerce, this is like part of everybody's like daily life, right? So going forward, what do I think will change? So I think that e-commerce used to be a nice to have for a cannabis company, and we learned during this pandemic that it's a must have. So I do think something we'll be seeing in the future is that this like proliferation to being like curbside pickup, online ordering, delivery is something that is here to stay much quicker than we thought it would be. And then also because people are really investing in digital, there's a lot of solutions out for them. For example, like Jane Technologies, they help companies like build their e-commerce platform so they can have a seamless integration from brand to retailer. So those are things I think people are going to be investing in. I also think like programmatic, being able to, as relates to niche, really finding your demographic. We've had, now 10, 15 years of, medical and recreational consumers. We're gathering data through some of, the digital marketing, so really be able to reach your demographic like any other marketer would. We're going to be starting seeing that as a trend. And also, this is the first time ever that brands can actually get to the consumer because of this data. Spring Big, which is a customer loyalty platform, they have over 19 million cannabis consumers on their platform. 19 million. That is like the largest sector they've ever heard of. Really, they're having all of their demographic data, maybe all of it, but like their purchase data, because you get a loyalty when you buy something. So really be able to target cannabis consumers. I think we're about to see like a new wave of really customizable products, reaching the right demographic, and then actually having repeatable experiences as it relates to marketing. And I think that's the future.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you. And I just wanted to touch on, I know the title of this panel was Future of Branding, Marketing, and Events. We actually got a lot of interest on the latter half of that, the event portion, throughout the past week. So we're going to have an extended, or a second version, I should say, of this panel next week. Everyone who is on is welcome to come back. But just to let you guys know, that is going to have George Jage of Jage Media, James Zacondi of Fairchild Events, Chris Day of Project Evolve, Lisa Buffo of the Cannabis Marketing Association, and Danny Diamond, the founder of Hall of Flowers. So if anyone is interested in that lineup, please be on the lookout for that. And I just wanted to open it to all of you for any final thoughts that you would like to touch on before we head off. I think that Angela's question was the only one in the chat, and Rosie touched on that. So I'll leave the floor to you. Or sorry, I should point to someone first. Yesenia, would you like to go first?
Okay. Well, thank you for having me on. And I think it's just an interesting journey. I've been in this for 1 year, although it feels like presidential aging, because everything is just changing so quickly. So we're definitely looking forward to launching Select in August. So look out for that in Florida. Very exciting time for us, and a few more introductions to the market in August. So
awesome.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Valda, would you like to go ahead?
Gosh, I guess let's just stay connected, right? As I said, I think that I honestly think that cannabis and the companies and the people that operate in these companies could be a really great force for change in a positive direction for the country. I throw that out there because of the times that we're in, with all of the economic uncertainty, stuff that's tearing at the social fabric of this country. It might be a bit of a lofty goal for a brand to fill that void, but we offer a space and a platform for people to talk, right? I think somebody said it best, and I'm learning a bit more as well about sort of, there's a bit of spirituality almost for some people in cannabis, right? There's a ritual, there's something about it coming from the plant versus purely chemical. And I think with that, the world kind of needs more of that healing. I'll throw that out there. So this is not so much a pure branding play, but it definitely is, how can we challenge ourselves to go beyond sort of the traditional and what we've always done to add greater meaning in people's lives. And so I think you'll see some more from Trulieve coming in the future. Not only in terms of products, but also in terms of a deeper meaning and a connection with the broader cannabis community. And we will be in rec states as well, as we already are, but we'll be extending.
Sure.
I would love to echo that, given our positions on this panel as helping, define the brand, the messaging of a company. Now is a time where we should take that responsibility very seriously and making sure that all of our employers or clients are thinking about corporate social responsibility. Now is the time to step up to the plate. And if we have like that voice within a company, we need to be using it for that. So I think, we've all been tasked with that over the past couple weeks, thinking about it and making sure that we're implementing that, forevermore.
Mm-hmm.
Well said.
And Jared, would you like to close it off?
I'm just thankful that I got to be on a panel with these amazing women, Evan, you included. No, it's great. Great. It's like I feel like I don't get to be on a ton of panels always where I feel like we're all talking about finally some advanced shit, right? not the cannabis 101. I love it, so I appreciate that. Also, if you guys wouldn't mind, follow my new YouTube channel. I put a link in the thing, so had to plug that because there's some funny pop peeves in there I think you guys might enjoy. They're all fairly relatable, but to the point I made earlier, I think these are great examples of what you can do for your brand. I mean, I'm just a person and I own an agency and I've got these other sub brands, but these are things that you guys can do, and it's not very difficult. It takes us like one day to make a video and then another to edit it. So like we do these once a week. So lots of stuff you guys can do. Anyways, thank you. Take care and much love.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Everyone.
Thank you in the audience for those
Bye.
who. I'll let you guys off the hook, but have a great night, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank
We
you.
have
Thank
we
you.
have like an after hours smoke sesh.
And if you'd like